5.5 is the last lesson of our week. Yesterday we reviewed the majority of the order of operations. We did the AS, which we called students. We did the MD, which we called teachers. And we did the E, which we called an administrator. Today we're going to look at the last piece to figure out how it fits. So far we should be able to make good decisions on this problem here, which again, based off of our training, the first thing we're supposed to do is look for any small floating numbers, which we see one here. Remembering that 2 squared means 2 times 2 because you'd multiply it twice. Or again, feel free to go ahead and take that and put 2 squared to see for yourself. Whatever it is, everything else gets rewritten. So 10 minus 16 divided by 8. This now turns into parentheses 4 and then plus 5. After all the small floating numbers are gone, we're supposed to look for the first teacher, and the first teacher in line is this one. So 10 minus 16 divided by 8 is 2. And then copy everything else. Once again, we're supposed to look for the first teacher in line, which is this, which is 2 times 4. And then we feed the first student and feed the first student to wrap that up. So again, 3 steps so far really to look at. Get rid of these small floating numbers, which are your exponents. Then feed the teachers one at a time, depending on who's in first or who's first in line. Again, don't read the whole thing and try to make a decision. Just ask yourself, is that a teacher? Is that a teacher? Yes, feed it. You shouldn't even notice that because you're looking for the first teacher, which once you see that means nothing else even matters. The highest level of order of operations is parentheses. In our lunch line situation, consider the parentheses to be like our principal. In my understanding, our school principal can cut in front of anyone they choose. So parentheses works the same way. The trick is making sure you know what a parentheses situation looks like. This is not a parentheses situation. This is just 8 times 3. In a parentheses situation, it means that there's something you can do inside, and all that's inside of this is a 3. That just means 8 times 3. That's not a parentheses. Notice how you can actually do 2 plus 5 on the inside. That is a parentheses situation. Yes, that looks like 1, but notice it's all inside of this is a 3. This is not a parentheses situation. That's 3 times 3. And then in this one, notice you can do 2 things. And actually what you would do is focus on this and figure out who would go first, which as we know should be the 6 times 2. So again, that is a parentheses situation that we would work with. But the key thing to remember about a parentheses situation is that there has to be an operation inside. Do not assume that just because there's a parentheses there, that goes first. Because again, this is the one where we do division first, multiplication second. That's just multiplication. This is a parentheses. So really what you're looking for in terms of parentheses is looking to see if there's work that can be done inside the parentheses first. Then from there you go ahead and do everything else. So again, notice how parentheses portions actually have a decision to be made. If there's no decision to make, it does not represent a parentheses situation. So when working out your parentheses step, be sure to ignore everything outside as you make your steps. So if we see something like this, we would look and say, hey, there's a parentheses and there's definitely a decision to be made right here. So I can't worry about anything else until that has been taken care of. So we do 4 parentheses, 10 minus 5 is 5, and we copy our second power. We now go through everything else, which is take care of the small floating numbers, which we have there. 5 squared means 5 times 5, which is 25. Now I do 4 times 25, which is 100 because 4 quarters make 100. And again, for proof, 4 parentheses 10 minus 5 closed squared equals 100. So your calculator is verifying that for you. Again, a parentheses just means before you do any of that other stuff, make sure your parentheses is simplified down to one number. So if we're looking at B, you have another parentheses situation, but inside that parentheses, we're looking at 2 options. And based off of what I know, this is the first thing we should deal with inside that parentheses. And 3 squared would turn to 9. So we copy the 5, we copy the 2 and the plus, we turn 3 squared into 9. But notice there's still a parentheses situation to deal with. 2 plus 9, which is going to turn into 11. And then from there we get the answer of 55. So that's the main thing we should be looking at there, okay? If we were to see something like this, 8 plus 2 times all this stuff, again, the first thing we do is focus on the parentheses and make the best decision we know to make. Based off what I know, the 2 squared is first. So we copy the 8, the plus, the 2, the parentheses, and the 4, and the minus. This now turns into 4 minus 3 because that was our first objective. Our second thing is, again, we still have parentheses, which we can do 4 minus 4. So we end up with 8 plus 2 parentheses. That turns into 0 minus 3. From there, we feed the first teacher because there are no floating numbers anymore, which is here. That's multiplication. Remember that 2 times 0 is not 2. It's not 1. It is 0. So 8 plus 0 minus 3 is what we end up with. First student's there, which becomes 8 minus 3, which then turns into the number 5. So again, being very careful, making sure you focus what's inside the parentheses first, not just because you see a parentheses going crazy and thinking that you're supposed to do something. You have to make sure there's something to do inside, like here, where we have decisions to make. And again, if just giving this decision here, based off of our training, what I know is that we would do the 2 times 3 first, because multiplication is stronger than subtraction. And so we would do 10 minus 3 parentheses, 7 minus, that becomes 6, plus 5. We would then take this thing and say, okay, well, we need to do these 7 minus 6 because it's inside of parentheses. Again, we don't do anything until our parentheses is broken down to one number. Now we get down to what we did before. No floating numbers, but there is a multiplication step there. So 10 minus 3 times 1 is 3, plus 5. 10 minus 3 turns into 7, plus 5, which is 12. And again, just for the sake of proof, because we have time, 10 minus 3 parentheses 7 minus 2 times 3 close plus 5 equals 12. So again, it helps to kind of have that, so that way you can actually make that decision. So this represents your complete introduction to the order of operations. A lot of teachers teach it in different ways. Unfortunately, some people, because of the fact that they don't math teachers in elementary grades and middle school grades don't have to have a math degree. Sometimes they teach it wrong. To me, the lunch line concept seems like a Sesame Street way to approach it, but in my opinion, it helps to make the right decision 100% of the time. If you're choosing to go off of, take care of the parentheses because that's your principal. Now we take care of the small floating numbers because that's the administrator. Now we deal with the multiplication or division, whoever's first in line. It does help. So just remember to slow down. Don't look at all the operations. Just look for what you're trying to deal with that one, and then go from there, rewrite it, and repeat. As soon as you try to visualize too much in this problem, it's going to throw you off. So when you see this problem, you can't be looking at, I'm going to take 3 times something, I'm going to add 5. You've got to look for, who am I dealing with? So you focus and you deal only with that. You don't see anything else but that, and then you rewrite everything else carefully. Then you focus here and say, I only have to deal with this. Once you do that, you say, well, now I'm looking for multiplication, or a teacher. There it is. Now I'm looking for a student. There it is. And then you work your way down. You cannot get distracted by everything else that's in the problem. Otherwise, it's going to be an issue. So outside of that, just make sure you ask questions if you have them. Again, if you're at home, make sure you're emailing me for the password, because that's the only way you can take the test. So outside of that, I'll talk to you later, and have a good day.